There are 67 delegates up for grabs tonight in Colorado. The state is hosting its first primary in 2 decades after switching from a caucus format earlier this year. Early polling showed Bernie Sanders with a lead heading into this Super Tuesday. But moderates are uniting behind former Vice President Joe Biden after a big win in South Carolina on Saturday. Shaun Boyd joins us now. She's a political specialist at CBS Denver. Shaun, thanks so much for being with us.
You bet.
So as we mentioned, Sanders has been strong in Colorado. Why is the senator resonating with voters there?
You know, it is interesting. We've had one poll so far that shows Sanders in the lead here. But, Elaine, I'll tell you, you mentioned Biden and people rallying behind Biden. This is not only our first presidential primary in 2 decades, it's our first all-male presidential primary ever, which makes it difficult to predict. But I'll tell you, a lot of voters, a third of voters had already turned in their ballots by the time Stiers and Klobuchar and Buttigieg dropped out. They cannot re-vote. So, you know, it'll be difficult what we read from the Colorado results because, you know, some of those people who voted for the Klobuchar or the Buttigieg may have gone to a Biden and were not able to because their ballots were already in.
So let's talk about the fact that you had Joe Biden's win in South Carolina with Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, as you say, both dropping out yesterday. At this point, are you hearing anything anecdotally from reporters there in Denver about folks, as we've been hearing from some of our reporters, are sort of delaying their own votes because they kind of want to have a feel for, you know, how things are playing out before they ultimately make their decision?
Right. Right. So as of this morning, we still have about 2/3 of our ballots still out there. So a lot of people have hung on to those ballots, you know, waiting to see just how this race shaped out, who would still be in the race by the time they voted. You know, you mentioned Biden and him gaining momentum, and, you know, the establishment has really rallied around him as the Sanders alternative in this race. Biden is the only major candidate still in the race that has not held a single public event here. He has not ran an ad here. He does not have campaign apparatus here. So he is behind some of these other candidates just in terms of his organization in this state.
Well, what are the issues most important to Democratic primary voters in Colorado? And I think we've got some new CBS News exit poll figures to talk about that a little bit more. There we see health care topping the list.
Right. As it is nationally, healthcare is a big issue here in Colorado. Our mountain communities have some of the highest healthcare costs in the country. What is interesting, in 2016, we had a ballot measure to create a statewide single-payer system, and that failed, overwhelmingly failed in 2016. Again, we have these unaffiliated voters who are weighing in this election. And so it will be interesting to see where they break. Do they break for a Sanders, you know, who is for a Medicare for all? And I think that will be telling. It will show that Sanders has certainly more support than the fringe left in a swing state like Colorado.
Right, and Colorado is now...
And Elaine, I want to talk too. There are a couple other issues. You know, when you talk about issues that are big in Colorado, one of the issues that is bigger here than in other states probably is fracking. Oil and gas is one of our biggest industries. And again, we had a ballot measure just in 2018 that would have effectively banned fracking here. That, again, failed overwhelmingly. Bernie Sanders in favor of banning fracking. He leads in the only, you know, the Magellan poll, the only major poll that has been done here. He is leading. So,
wow, that is a fascinating note. Let's also talk about, though, this big Senate race in your state. Tell us the latest on that race.
So I think, you know, it will be interesting to see who emerges as the presidential nominee, because that will have an impact in Colorado. Our two main candidates in that Senate primary. The primary isn't until the end of June. Our former Speaker of the House, Andrew Romanoff, who is definitely in line with Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. Our other main candidate is our former governor and former presidential contender, John Hickenlooper, who is definitely a moderate, who has opposed Medicare for All, opposed the Green New Deal. So if a Sanders is at the top of the ticket, that could be tricky, certainly, for a Hickenlooper, who will not change his positions, he has said, even recently. So Sanders supporters would not necessarily be Hickenlooper supporters. So I think it could definitely change the dynamic of that race if you have a Hickenlooper as the Senate nominee and a Sanders as the presidential nominee.
Fascinating. All right, Shaun Boyd for us. Shaun, thank you.